that it's clicks, right?
For sure. They definitely know it. And, like, they'll give us something these days where here's our top 10 in the United States today. But the writers, they wanted to know that if a show's a mega hit, like, we want to profit from that too. That's the way the old system used to work. And the other interesting thing they were asking for was about AI.
And what exactly were they asking for when it comes to AI?
I mean, there were several different things, but let's focus on one, which is if I'm a studio executive and I have a stack of Nora Ephron scripts. She wrote You've Got Mail, for instance.
Famous writer.
Among many other things. But I take those scripts, I feed them into the AI robot, and I say, give me a Nora Ephron style of a rom-com, of a romantic comedy. That is the writer's worst nightmare because they don't want a robot to be the accredited writer of a movie. So, no good, no bueno.
Okay, so that's the basic list of things the writers were asking for. And now, what do we know about what they did get?
So, it's going to become more clear in the coming days. But we know that they got a lot. We know they got much of what they asked for. And, you know, we were talking about their statement vibrating with joy earlier.
Exactly, right.
The studio's only statement was the Writers Guild of America, the Writers Union, and the Studio Alliance have reached a tentative agreement. Period. Full stop. That's it. It was pretty muted. So they gave up a lot more than they were anticipating 5 months ago. And the union, they said they made meaningful gains and protections for every writer in every sector of the union membership.
Translation, we got a lot of what we want.
Yes.
Okay, so how do you explain such a victory for the writers?
So there were a few key moments. So after the writers go on strike, that's early May, all of a sudden the studios have two other contracts to deal with, Hollywood directors and then the actors. The studios are not worried about the directors or actors.
Why?
The writers have gone on strike many times over the decades. Directors and actors, they just have not gone on strike nearly as many times. Last time the actors went on strike was over 4 decades ago.
Oh, wow. Okay, so just typically there's a big difference between those groups.
Completely. So the studios negotiate with the directors, get a deal done really quickly. The directors call the deal historic. So 1 down, 1 to go. And then sure enough, by mid-July, the actors do go on strike, and it kind of stuns everybody. Producers, agents, Hollywood observers, but it also surprises the studio executives. So by the time the actors go on strike, the writers have been on strike for 2.5 months. It's mid-July, it's getting hot outside. It's hot in LA, it's hot in New York. They've been walking these picket lines for 2.5 months. And the actors' surprise strike, because everybody was caught off guard, there's suddenly wind at the backs of the writers. They're not so lonely on those picket lines anymore. It's this huge moment of solidarity. The actors and writers, they hadn't been on strike at the same time going back generations. It was since 1960. So it had been years. And that is what shut down Hollywood, because all of a sudden cameras can't roll anymore. You can't work without actors. It got the attention of everybody. So, if you're the studio executives, this is no longer one irritating union out there. Everything is completely stopped. So you have to deal with somebody. And so the studios said, okay, you know what? Writers, we haven't talked to them in months. They've been out for a while. We're going to turn to them first.
And what happens?
So, effectively, very little happens. There were negotiations, but it was just very on again, off again throughout the month of August. You know, there was something about the month of August. Everybody's on vacation. You know, it's like, okay, of course, there are a couple strikes happening, big deal.
Right.
The temperature changed the second we hit the second week of September. All of a sudden, everybody's rubbing the sleep out of their eyes from the summer. And then they looked around and they said, why isn't anybody working? What's happening? And also the studios just, frankly, began to look at their balance sheets. Warner Brothers Discovery, big entertainment company, they had to go out and announce that our adjusted earnings, because of the strikes, are going to take a hit of anywhere between $300 and $500 million this year. That's the studio behind Barbie.
Right.
Like the hit, huge performance. And even with that performance, Warner Brothers Discovery is starting to sweat this a little bit.
Wow, so like if this studio is struggling, then every studio is struggling.
Precisely. But it's not just the studios. The writers, they've been out of work now for 4 or 5 months. It's a long time not to get a paycheck. And by the time we're at September, we notice that some of the biggest name writers in Hollywood, Kenya Barris, he created Blackish on ABC. Noah Hawley, he created the TV show Fargo for FX. Ryan Murphy, he created American Horror Story. They started getting kind of restless. They were saying, what's going on? Why aren't we even in a room? We haven't talked to studios in weeks by this point. And they were trying to meet with guild leadership just to ask, like, what's going on? And we're still reporting out what exactly happened there. But here's what we do know. The union and the studios then did agree to meet. And that meeting happened last week. Studio executives, top executives, were suddenly sitting in the room. Disney chief executive Bob Iger, Warner Brothers Discovery chief executive David Zaslav, Netflix co-chief executive Ted Sarandos, and a huge executive at NBC Universal, Donna Langley. They were sitting in the room. That had not happened.
And what's the significance of that, John? What did it mean that they were there?
It meant we mean business now. Because it's like, whoa, if they're showing up, they want to get this deal done.
It's close.
It's close. And sure enough, within 5 days, over the weekend, they reached that tentative agreement. And how they did it's pretty simple. They went down the writers' list of asks and basically hit on all of them. And most significantly, they opened up their wallet. And they opened up their wallet in a way that they weren't willing to do 4 or 5 months ago.
So basically, the studios paid up.
Exactly.
So is the way to think about this, John, that the writers kind of just waited the studios out?
Yeah, I mean, the studios were hurting. I mean, they need productions to be happening because they need new shows. They need new movies. They need to put these things on their streaming services. I mean, already we've seen significant fallout from the strikes. Prospective blockbuster movies that were scheduled for this year have been moved to next year. TV series that were scheduled for this year have been moved to next year. So they had to make this deal. They did have to open up their wallet. But just because they got this deal, it does not mean that production is going to start again immediately. Remember, the studios still have another contract to negotiate. The actors are still on strike. You had 2 walkouts, and you've got to solve one before you solve the other. So, post-strike, the writers got a lot of what they asked for. The reality is, the cost won't just be borne by the studios. There might be a cost to the writers, too.
We'll be right back.
The Daily is supported by Baird. Employee-owned Baird offers financial advice focused on clients' needs without the distraction of outside shareholders. More at BairdDifference.com. Hear the stories shaping the world's conversation. You're listening to The Daily, produced by The New York Times. Learn more at nytimes.com/The Daily. Distribution of The Daily is made possible by American Public Media. APM produces and distributes programs that inform and inspire, entertain, and engage audience